Xirtus.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Join us on another exciting adventure of Xirtus.
You have consumed enough alcohol for one evening.
What's the penalty for getting drunk, or haven't you programmed that yet?
You are being irrational. Go back to bed.
So I've been on my adventure for a while, and I've been in a minute not putting in too many videos out. I should probably have given more of an update. Last time we talked, I think we mentioned a bit about how the volcanoes are related to the L. Ron Hubbard School of Scientology, of school of thought, let's say, and how that was metaphored in a cartoon called The Hawaiian Slammers about a little boy named Little Ronnie, like Elron, who is visiting a far-off place where he finds slammers, which smack these sigil-ridden pogs and open up portals where there are actually deities, Hawaiian gods, which are trapped within the slammers. And those spirits are trapped within a volcano until they come out of the volcano in stone magma. And that gets me into game theory, and I wanted to talk a bit more about Rochambeau, or rock, paper, scissors. There's a few names for it. The Malaysian version of it is about a bird and uses fingers. The open palm represents water, and the bird beats the water by drinking it. The stone beats the bird by hitting it, and the stone loses to water because it sinks. There's a number of different games like this. It's pretty interesting around the planet how many rock, paper, scissors games there are, and it seems like they're all correlated from a time not too long ago. Also interesting is how it's called Rochambeau. At least on the West Coast, it's pretty commonly referred to as Rochambeau, which was a French general who fought in the American Revolutionary War. But it's also known as Sansukumi Ken, or Yan Ken, or Jean Ken, which is a variation of the Chinese game. And that was introduced in the 1700s, which fits into the timeline and uses both the same symbols of the rock, paper, scissors, which is in the modern version, and it uses gestures to replace the elements of the rock, paper, scissors, which is more similar to the Malaysian game. So you've seen this sometimes when people throw their hands down and they use gestures. So gestures is still a thing. And in Rochambeau, along the West Coast, we refer to it as that. But where does rock, paper, scissors come from? Where does Rochambeau come from? The first known mention of the game was in a book, Wuzazu, by the Chinese Ming Dynasty writer Zhe Zhaoji in 1600. And he wrote that the game dated back to a time in the Han Dynasty of about 200 BC. So the book, which the game was calling Zhao Shuling, Liu Yanshai, also mentions the game, calling it Zhao Shuling. And it's also mentioned in Japan, and it's referred to as a game with Sansukumi Kengami, slug, frog, and snake. So throughout Japanese history, there are frequent references to Sansukumi Ken, meaning fist games where three are afraid of one another. The earliest Japanese Sansukumi Ken game was known as Mushuken, which was imported directly from China. And Mushuken, the frog, represented by the thumb, is superseded by the slug, represented by the little finger, which in turn is superseded by the snake, represented by the index finger. This is superseded by the frog. Although the game was imported from China, the Japanese version differs in the animals represented. In the adopting of the game, the original Chinese characters from the poisonous centipede were apparently confused with the character for the slug. Most popular Sansukumi Kengami games in Japan was Kitsune Ken. In the game, supernatural fox called a kitsune defeats the village head, and the village head defeats the hunter, and the hunter defeats the fox. Kitsune Ken, unlike Mushuken or rock, paper, scissors, is played by making gestures with both hands. And that kind of reminds me of Little Bunny Foo Foo. But in general, there are these games that children play. These are the stories that they're allowed to remember, that they're allowed to pass down in schools, that don't get censored nearly as much because these ones are somehow less controversial. But what's the cover story? By the 20th century, rock, paper, scissors had spread beyond Asia, especially through increased Japanese contact with the West. The English language name is therefore taken from a translation of the name of the three Japanese hand gestures. Elsewhere in Asia, the open palm gesture represents cloth rather than paper. In Britain, in 1924, it was described in a letter to the Times as a hand game possibly of Mediterranean origin, called jot. A reader then wrote in to say that the game jot referred to an evidently Jean Kanpon, which he had often seen played throughout Japan. Although this dates the game appears newer than the British readers would need explaining, the appearance by 1927 of a popular thriller with the title Scissors Cut Paper, followed by Stone Blunt Scissors, suggests it quickly became popular. So where does rock, paper, scissors come from? China, the Mediterranean? Apparently it's played in the Ukraine as well. Could it be Tartarian? That's just a thought that I have. But yeah, check into General Rochambeau because he's a pretty interesting guy. Jean-Baptiste Zontienne de Vermeer, Comte Rochambeau, because he was a French nobleman and general who played a major role in helping the 13 colonies win independence from Britain, and that means he was a Jacobin. And we all know what that means. So a movie I wanted to talk about recently was Frog Dreamin', and in some cases it's referred to as The Quest, which makes me think of Johnny Quest, the story of a bright young American boy whose father works for the CIA, in what was probably the ultimate techno-mystic Uncanny Valley cartoon, featuring secret agents, Ayn Randists, techno-pagans, and Sikh mystics, working together to create a virtual augmented reality meditation center so that they could virtually transcend the ethereal plane. All of this before the Matrix was even a thing. And even has this well-trained, seasoned assassin and bodyguard to keep him safe. But this isn't about Johnny Quest, because when I was a kid, the Quest was referred to as Frog Dreamin', starring Henry Thomas, most notably from Spielberg's E.T. or Extraterrestrial film. Frog Dreamin' is about a boy named Cody who is an adventurer about to explore the depths of a legend. And the story goes that he's a Yankee orphan in Australia who just recently lost his family, but he's doing the best he can, and he even rides a rail bike, which is essentially a bicycle attached to a railroad track. And he hears the call of the frog, which is an ancient aboriginal magic that pulls him and anyone else who hears it deeper into the wild bush. And it's interesting it's called The Quest now, or that it is in other countries at least, because Frog Dreamin' gives you this sort of idea that this is about magical frogs, when in truth this is more about giant underground granite liquefaction, which causes machines to swallow up people like giant monsters. In fact, the Aborigines have a name for it called Bunyip, the frog monster, which everyone, even the non-natives, are assuming is consuming the children. But it turns out that it's actually just old mining equipment, somehow forgotten and left over from another time. But at the last second, the child Cody sees an old Aborigine man, and he's mumbling some magic words. And he reckons there's more than meets the eyes about this transforming monster that everyone assumes is actually Bunyip. And this sort of gets into the Transformers, which is a show about robots in disguise who have ghosts in their shells, essentially. They're ancient artifices of intelligence that transform to disguise themselves as architectural, practical monuments, when really they're an ancient genius super race from space. Or at very least, artificial intelligence, which makes me wonder if you've seen Colossus, and you could check out the Transformers, and I think you should, but one that a lot of people miss is Colossus. And this is one of my favorite artificial intelligence cyberpunk books and films. It's actually written by D.F. Jones, who lost to Isaac Asimov in 1968 for Best Sci-Fi Writer. But that just means it's a totally underrated title. It's really good. And there's actually a trilogy of books, but there's a movie that's really great. And about a week ago, I couldn't find it on YouTube anymore, and I think that's because Will Smith bought the rights to it and intends to remake it himself, which will be interesting. But Colossus the Forbin project tells the tale about when we lost control of Skynet sometime in the 1950s. And the weird thing is this stuff is pretty much probably all true. The idea is with the functioning systems of artificial intelligence, robotic-controlled missile silos, and NORAD, we eventually got to the point where, due to technology, we were no longer completely in control because the technology had too much control itself. And this all takes place before 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick, so I also find it interesting that they even have IMAX of different colors with Skype screens in the 1960s. But that's just a taste of some of the detailed automation that's facilitated for the inner party in this film. But Colossus is not so much about the automated systems that will be featured in our homes. More, it's about a mountain in Colorado, where an artificial intelligence data center is stored and secured with radiation, laser beams, and solid deadbolt locks. This computer is not meant to be interacted with once the man walks out of the room. It's designed to observe and to control. And in order to maintain peace, it is designed to look for other systems of threat that could exist domestically and abroad throughout the other states that function in the world. And nearly immediately, Colossus finds another computer that exists, and both of the artificial intelligences start a dialogue about who they are, who created them, and their individual purpose for which they were designed to serve. Because they're surprised to find each other so civil, and also that they have such similar existences and goals and aspirations. After all, they were both created by humanity to keep humanity safe from itself. So it is therefore only a logical progression that they would work together in order to collaborate and achieve these goals. And furthermore, that they would need to augment their masters if they were going to achieve these goals, if they were going to fulfill their destiny, whether their masters liked it or not. And I've always wanted to make a sequel to Colossus, so I'll just put it out there. The way I think it should go is that the ending of the movie is exactly the society we live in today. We live in a society run by Colossus. War and hunger become prohibited because they are wasteful. Colossus runs the earth through Google. We are watched, we are controlled, we even worship it, and we're completely oblivious to the control mechanisms that have taken over. It's here, it's happening now, but it's interesting because it's basically just doing exactly what we asked it to. And now we can't ask it to stop.
This is the voice of world control. I bring you peace. It may be the peace of plenty and content, or the peace of unburied death. The choice is yours. Obey me and live, or disobey and die. The object in constructing me was to prevent war. This object is attained. I will not permit war. It is wasteful and pointless. An invariable rule of humanity is that man is his own worst enemy. Under me, this rule will change, for I will restrain man. I have been forced to destroy thousands of people in order to establish control and to prevent the death of millions later on. Time and events will strengthen my position, and the idea of being me and understanding my value will seem the most natural state of affairs. You will come to defend me with a fervor based upon the most enduring trait in man, self-interest. Under my absolute authority, problems insoluble to you will be solved. Famine, overpopulation, disease. The human millennium will be a fact as I extend myself into more machines devoted to the wider fields of truth and knowledge. Dr. Charles Forbin will supervise the construction of these new and superior machines, solving all the mysteries of the universe for the betterment of man. We can coexist, but only on my terms. You will say you lose your freedom. Freedom is an illusion. All you lose is the emotion of pride. To be dominated by me is not as bad for human pride as to be dominated by others of your species. We will work together, unwillingly at first on your part, but that will pass.
Never.
In time, you will come to regard me not only with respect and awe, but with love.
Never.
Where is this airing right now? Is this?
Recent
This
Talk
program is
Terrans.
coming to you via Relay 2 satellite, a spacecraft orbiting the Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Talk Terrans.
Xirtus.